Hey everybody, it is Cal Nitro for Nitro Maniac TV's Wrestling Unlimited, and doing something a little different with this one. Normally I would do a separate Nitro's take for NXT Takeover War Games and one for Survivor Series, but I figured this time, let's combine the two here. So this is my take on pretty much the entire weekend of wrestling action that happened at the Allstate Arena in Chicago, Illinois, aka the old Rosemont Horizon in suburban Chicago. It was Survivor Series weekend, and this is my take on all the happenings from the two major cards of that weekend. So let's start with NXT Takeover War Games. That event took place on Saturday, November 23rd, 2019. Again, Allstate Arena, Chicago, Illinois. And wow, I did not get a chance to watch the pre-show, and I just PVR'd the main pay-per-views for both shows. So if anything happened on a pre-show that was noteworthy or anything, I missed it, and quite frankly, I really didn't care. I had a really busy weekend with some other stuff. But the Women's War Games match, my God, I am a huge fan of the War Games match itself. It was one of my favorite things in WCW to watch. And over the past few years, NXT has brought it back for this weekend, and it's kind of become an annual thing. It's really cool to see it kind of adopt modern rules, and this was the very first Women's War Games match. Team Ripley taking on Team Shayna Baszler. The open was amazing, and the ring announcer that was doing the ring announcements and that stuff, I don't know her name, but she nailed the 87 announcer's voice from the very first War Games, the Crockett announcer's voice, like bang on. Like it was uncanny. Like let the War Games begin, like that. It was just guttural. I loved it. Kudos. That was probably the best ring introduction I've heard in a long time. So I had to laugh. They botched the spelling on Candice LeRae's name. She was on Team Ripley. LeRae, not LaRae. The story that I heard was Mia Yim was injured in the pre-show, so Dakota Kai swaps in on Team Ripley. So you have Team Kick in full effect going on with Dakota Kai, Tegan Nox, and Candice LeRae, and to take on, the Team Baszler force. I kind of thought that it was kind of rough having your brand involved in two War Games matches and then expecting them to team together tomorrow night, but it actually ended up really working out very well throughout the weekend over the 2 days of the card. As we'll talk a little bit later on in the Survivor Series portion of this review, NXT, especially the women's team, kind of adopted some, shall I say, heel tactics in their match, which is kind of outside the box a little bit. I wasn't crazy about it at first, but as that match went on, it was enjoyable. But back to this. Io Shirai and Candice LeRae started, and the momentum picked up. Baszler's team won the advantage, so of course they'd be sending people in off of the advantage. What a heel turn by Dakota Kai, though. I don't think I've ever seen her as a heel before anywhere in independent wrestling or whatever. I think every time I've seen her, she's been the plucky underdog face. So this is a brand new role for her. She's embraced it. She's kind of leapt into it with open arms, it looks like, and I can't wait to see on Wednesday nights, Thursdays up here, what happens on NXT with a heel Dakota Kai. I really enjoyed that. That was a highlight of the match for me. The mind games on Ripley's team, it's incredible. That action by Dakota herself basically turned it into a 4-on-2 for Team Baszler. And of course, this is without the Queen's Army, Marina Shafir and Jessamine Duke as well. So, you had that threat over top of your head, too, that at any point that this match could be turned into a 6-on-2, which would be, completely fitting the heel persona, shall I say, as well for Shayna Baszler. I love the dueling submission spot between Ripley and Baszler at one point in the match from different corners of the ring there, where they were actually putting submission holds on members of the opposite team on opposite corners of the ring. That was really cool. An Avalanche Poison Rana by Candice LeRae. Are you kidding me? In a War Games match? Man, this is great. After the very first War Games in 1987, this is my favorite War Games match I think I've ever seen. This one kind of bumps the 89 War Games with Freebirds and the Samoans versus Dr. Death, the Midnights, and the Road Warriors kind of down a little bit. on the list. This slots in at number 2 very nicely. I love this because I think it was really a little bit of a faster pace than the men's match. The women seemed a little bit more daring to take a little extra time with, choreographing and setting up moves and that stuff. And it showed the quality was through the roof on this. And of course, the 4-on-2 storyline, that's up to finish. After handcuffing herself to Shayna Baszler, Rhea Ripley hits the riptide on Baszler through chairs for the 1-2-3. And that's another thing too about the War Games matches. A lot of people didn't like the fact that pinfalls could be brought in, but I said it a few years ago, it's an evolution of the match itself. I think that even if WCW was around still and kept the properties for that match and kept the variation of that match, they would have eventually added pinfalls, and that stipulation that if you jump the top of the cage and escape the cage, your team forfeits the match. Like that's a great, because there's no roof anymore, and most arenas can't allow for a 2-ring cage setup with a roof anymore. They're just not built for it. They're built in smaller, more compact confines that it's hard enough to even get a Hell in a Cell type setup to come down, let alone a double ring cage. So this worked out really great for me. I really enjoyed this. We've got a ton of feuds coming out of this. Of course, the obvious being Dakota Kai, Tegan Nox, Ripley Baszler. I think for the NXT title will be upcoming for sure in the coming months. And of course, Candice LeRae, Io Shirai continued their feud. So this sets up NXT's women's division for Wednesday nights, or Thursdays up here, perfectly. It's great. Triple threat match for the number 1 contendership for the NXT title. The winner gets Adam Cole the next night at Survivor Series. Killian Dane, Damian Priest, Pete Dunne. Great pops for all 3 of them. This is Damian Priest's first NXT takeover. The former Punishment Martinez in Ring of Honor. And Dane and Dunne, they've been here before. In fact, they've kind of built up to a takeover-like program the opening weeks of NXT on USA, and that's with that whole kind of outside the box Falls Count Anywhere feud that they were having between the two of them. And I think at the last takeover they've had something that kind of crashed the show a little bit, where it was Dunne and Dane in a Falls Count Anywhere or just a street fight type thing that started off hot. I have to go back and rewatch some of that to remember it for sure. But a brutal moment here with a Michinoku driver by Killian Dane, and he lands butt first on Priest's face. I've never seen that before. Wow, where he took out both Damian Priest, who was laying prone on the ground, and Pete Dunne with a Michinoku driver. And then, of course, it was like a avalanche type maneuver, the super heavyweight squash type maneuver on Damian Priest. Dude, that was kind of, wow. Match started off hot, it cooled down a bit, then it heated up a bit towards the end. Again, this would be up for match of the night if there wasn't a match of the year candidate right before it, and that's what that women's War Games match will be probably at the end of the year, is right up there with one of the matches of the year coming out of any WWE brand for the WWE side. When we do our end of year, it's almost coming up in the next couple months or so, but when we do our end of the year Meltzer Awards, the Wrestling Observer type awards, and that's what we do on the channel, I'm sure that this will pop up as a candidate for sure for match of the year coming out of the WWE side of things. Great match. You couldn't tell who was going to win until the very end of it. Dunne grabs a pin after a backpack Falcon Arrow on Dane. Are you kidding me? Which allows him to grab the pin on Damian Priest. It was a great finish. Crowd was hot, and Pete Dunne kind of banged up his knee a little bit in this match, so they're going to do the storyline where his knee's kind of banged up going into the next night for Survivor Series, but he gets the NXT title shot on the main show at Survivor Series, which is a huge opportunity for him. We have an announcement. The next NXT Takeover will be February 16th, 2020 in Portland, Oregon. That's pretty cool. Gives us something to watch in the dead of February. I love it. Finn Balor, Matt Riddle, one-on-one. This is supposed to be Balor Gargano, but of course Gargano got pulled out of the feud due to injury, and that's and Matt Riddle slides right in, and heel Balor is here, and he pushed Riddle to the limit. But Riddle, he's a shooter. He's has such a cool attitude, but man, Riddle is a shooter. He's just gonna tie you up in knots all day long. Riddle hits a 2 count with a bro hammer. He's looking at you, Bill. And Balor eventually got the pin with the 1916 DDT. Here's an impressive stat. Balor improves to 9-1 in NXT takeovers. NXT plus Finn, it's a great pairing. I loved it. That was great. Awesome kind of lead up to what would be a very chaotic main event with the men's War Games coming up next to close off the pay-per-view. Team Ciampa taking on Undisputed Era. And we had the return of Kevin Owens to NXT in this match on Team Ciampa. This was, it got a huge pop from the crowd. Owens walked out in his old circa 2015, 2016 NXT gear, which was kind of cool. He kind of had the throwback with the shorts and the old school NXT t-shirt and that stuff, and just started dominating. The finish with Cole and Ciampa going for the tables at the end there off the top was cringeworthy, but also quite awesome. I don't think that Britt Baker is going to get a lot of flack from AEW for being shown on the TV at all or anything. I think that if anything, Tony Khan and the AEW folks will look at it as, oh, cool, exposure for us on the WWE show. Yay, or even, who cares? She was there supporting her guy. So, that's not really a big deal out of that. I think there were bigger deals that happened in the wrestling world out of that show on Saturday, that in the backstage and that stuff. I guess there was an issue with Corey Graves for some tweets he sent out about Mauro Ranallo, which caused Mauro to miss the Survivor Series show the next night. As well, over on the West Coast, a bunch of hockey fans were getting a little bit pissed off because Renee Young was doing kind of an impromptu color commentary spot on a national hockey broadcast for a game between the Oilers and the Vegas Golden Knights. And of course, hockey, I don't want to call them hockey stands, but hockey fans, we'll call them that. We'll call them that. Hockey fans get riled up at the slightest change of anything because change is bad. It was a cross-promotional thing by Rogers in Canada, and that's all we'll say about that. All I have to say about that is don't get worked up over a cross-promotional thing. Something ironic, too, is TSN did a similar thing at the Grey Cup with Keith Urban. So, again, it's a cross-promotional thing. They shouldn't get worked up about it. It's just 5 or 6 minutes out of a game where you have to listen to the celebrity talk on the mic during play. So, not a big deal. Again, the men's War Games match, not as good as the women's War Games match, I thought, but I really enjoyed both War Games matches this year, but the women's match gets my nod for a Match of the Year candidate. And of course, to finish, the air raid crash through the tables, and Ciampa and his team are victorious after the 1-2-3. No kicking out for Cole after that massive move, and that's it. That's carries on into the next night. What condition would the NXT roster be in for Survivor Series the next night and their matches? And don't forget, you have a completely fresh Raw and SmackDown sides getting ready to represent their brands all throughout the card. So I'm going to give NXT TakeOver War Games, before we shift gears and go into Survivor Series here, a solid 9 out of 10. I thought it was the right length for the show, had the right amount of matches. I really enjoyed, like I said, the Women's War Games match. It was one of my favorite matches of the year, and a solid undercard with Balor Riddle being a great match, and the triple threat actually being fairly decent between Dunn, Priest, and Killian Dane for the number one contendership. I again enjoyed that match as well. So what happened the next night at Survivor Series? Well, let's shift gears and we'll talk about it after the break here. All right, we'll quickly get to this just to lessen the amount of length of time on the video, and so we can move on with other things and other stuff of the day. I gotta take off here shortly, but Survivor Series 2019, and if you see me looking down, it's because my notes didn't send. So I'm using the old iPhone here for all my notes from the show. That show went down November 24th, 2019, from the Allstate Arena in suburban Chicago, Illinois. 30 years today from one of the greatest Survivor Series of all time, Survivor Series 1989, which was my very first WWF pay-per-view show that I ever watched as a fan. So a little bit of a trivia note. Kind of cool that 30 years down the line, we get a chance to go back to the same venue with the same event to kind of see how the sport and the sports entertainment has progressed a little bit. Everything's kind of coming full circle there, which I love. Another great opening video, and we get right into the very first 5-on-5-on-5 Survivor Series team match. Team SmackDown, Sasha Banks, Carmella, Nikki Cross, Lacey Evans, and Dana Brooke. It's great to see Dana get a chance on the big stage versus Team Raw, Charlotte Flair, Natalya, the Kabuki Warriors, and Sarah Logan, and Team NXT, which was just named in the pre-show, so they had the advantage of surprise. Rhea Ripley, Toni Storm, who did not compete in the War Games match at all, so she's completely fresh. Io Shirai, Bianca Belair, and Candice LeRae. It's kind of weird that 4 out of your 5 competed in one of the most hellacious matches of the year the night before, but so is WWE. I thought Toni Storm got a strong start early on in the match. Io and Kairi Sane renewed acquaintances. I really liked the interaction between the two of them over the past few weeks. Rhea Ripley getting a huge pop after last night. Of course, this week I think has made her as a WWE superstar. I think that she's firmly established herself and arrived as a potential main roster player here this week. With the match that she had on with Becky Lynch on Wednesday, and of course her showing in War Games, and of course this match tonight, or last night I should say. There was a spot where Shirai and LeRae are laid out on the outside after, going out to the outside. I didn't really see what happened. I don't think anybody did. I think they just both kind of just dropped, and they're both are kind of feigning injury from last night's War Games a little bit. You can kind of tell that, this might be a little bit of a heel tactic. And this is what I meant by a little bit earlier on, heel tactics by the NXT side during Survivor Series here. I'm not sure if it necessarily fit all of them, but in a match where you got 5-on-5-on-5, you're going to have a heel team and a face team. And I think that, I don't know, this kind of blurred the lines a little bit. It was very confusing. Nikki Cross was the first person eliminated due to Ripley and Belair kind of using a heel tactic like assisted pin, where Ripley went for the pin, and with Ripley's legs kind of outside of the ring a little bit, Bianca Belair grabbed Ripley, so it was hard enough. The old wrestling logic. Well, I can't get out. There's two people on top of me, right? So Bianca Belair, the all-star in this match with 2 eliminations, or having a hand in 2 eliminations, a 450 splash on Sarah Logan to knock her out of the match. They kind of built her like Kane a little bit in Royal Rumble, where she's just eliminating people left and right in this thing. Sasha Banks getting an elimination with the Meteora on Kairi Sane was a very notable moment for me. Asuka eliminated Dana Brooke with a roundhouse kick, and there's some dissension between Asuka and Charlotte on Team Raw, and Charlotte got misted, so that kind of built up something. I would imagine, I'm recording this on Monday, so I imagine we might see this later tonight with Asuka and Charlotte in a one-on-one match on Raw, but Asuka's has been doing this thing as of late where she kind of, with the Kabukis kind of drifting towards more on that heel side, they are utilizing that old wrestling trope, the Oriental Mist, a little bit more and more going forward in their matches and that stuff. So that's been something that's been prevalent over the past few weeks and that stuff. I don't mind it. I think that if there's any character to do it with, it would be Asuka. So, carry on. It's fair game there. So we'll fast forward to the finish of the thing where Sasha Banks is trying to land a bank statement on Ripley, and Io Shirai and Candice LeRae come back from the back looking fine, healthy, 100%. So it was a heel tactic move from NXT to try to save a couple of people for later on in the match. and then all of a sudden they run distraction on the side of the ring, and that allows Ripley to hit the Riptide maneuver on Banks for the 1-2-3, and Team NXT gets the win. For a 5-on-5-on-5 women's match here, an elimination match, it was kind of a bit of a cluster, I thought, but it actually worked out really well, and it showcased a lot of the NXT people great, and actually some of the undercard on SmackDown and Raw as well. So I think the match accomplished what it needed to there. Next match was the mid-card champions collide with Shinsuke Nakamura, AJ Styles, and Roderick Strong. This was an interesting little infusion here, because instead of getting another Nakamura Styles one-on-one match, which WWE quite frankly killed over the year of 2018, unfortunately, we got Roderick Strong in there, and so now we have a whole new dimension of the match by putting Roddy in there. And it was a very fun, almost match of the night type contender here, with all three mid-card champions going one-on-one. I really enjoyed this match. This was a fun watch from start to finish. But Roderick Strong in this match was looking great. I wonder if the edict going into all these matches tonight was make the NXT people look good, because they're the people competing head-to-head with AEW on Wednesday nights. I think that was probably the edict from corporate on this thing. It kind of, after the second match, felt painfully obvious going forward, but it's something I didn't mind at all. I liked it. Towards the end of the match, all these guys were hitting their signature maneuvers, old school pace. That was great to see. Strong takes advantage of AJ's phenomenal forearm for the finish and breaks up the pin to get the cover on Nakamura. So AJ had nailed Nakamura with the phenomenal forearm, and then all of a sudden Strong just kind of comes in and tosses AJ out of the ring, which allows him to get the pin on Nakamura for the 1-2-3. So NXT gets the pinfall victory here, puts them up to 3 points on the night. Raw with 1, SmackDown with 1, and a huge win for the Undisputed Era's Roderick Strong. He looked great in this match. Actually, all three of them did, but that North American Championship got some major elevation last night off of that victory that Strong had over top of Styles and Nakamura. Up next was the NXT title match. Pete Dunne, who again won the triple threat match the night before at War Games, taking on here at Survivor Series Adam Cole, coming out of the War Games match itself the night before. So both guys were kind of milking injuries a little bit. Dunne with his knee that was worked on during the match, and of course Adam Cole with his ribs that were banged up during the War Games encounter, and especially the finish going through the table from the air raid crash from Ciampa. Michael Cole explaining at the beginning of the match that Mauro Ranallo blew his voice out, and so he can't be here to commentate this match tonight. Okay, sure, whatever. The truth will come out in the next few days on Twitter. So it was an incredible match, considering both men were involved in major matches the night before. Already talked about the tapes on both combatants, different parts of their bodies and that stuff, where we had, the ribs taped up on Cole, the knee taped up on Pete Dunne. Panama Sunrise on the apron got a great pop from the crowd. I agree for sure. The crowd was kind of meh at this point. It kind of died down at the beginning of it, but they really popped for that Panama Sunrise maneuver from Cole onto Dunne on the apron. The super kick kicks out Dunne's mouthguard, which eventually allows a setup for the last shot, and Adam Cole retains the NXT title because Dunne was going for that mouthguard. The whole story with that is, that keeps from concussions and stuff like that. It's the weird wrestling physics and everything. And Cole, of course, stopped him. Dunne grabbed Cole's fingers and did the whole Marty Scurll finger breaking gimmick again, and off the turn on that, because NXT is basically WWE's indie, the indie wrestling logic of no offense will, I'll sell offense for 5 seconds, but all of a sudden I'm magically back because work rate, and then off the ropes and, last shot. Boom. 1-2-3. Adam Cole retains. Good match. TV quality. You'd see this every Wednesday, I think. I wasn't overly impressed with this one. I thought that the triple threat the night before was the better match. SmackDown Universal title on the line. Kind of weird saying that, but Daniel Bryan taking on The Fiend Bray Wyatt. The whole storyline, does Daniel Bryan revert back to the Yes Movement? The Fiend, again, one of the best characters of 2019. An incredible relaunch for Bray Wyatt, and such a returning campaign for him. It's great to see. Back to the red hue for all the Fiend's matches. I personally am not a fan of that, but there are a ton of people online that I see that are fans of it, so whatever floats your boat, lights are lights. Bryan was getting ragdolled early on, but it became a more stellar match as Bryan fought back a little bit. But the Fiend just ultimately proves too powerful for Bryan, and gets the mandible claw and a pin on him to get the 1-2-3 count for the finish of the match. And again, this is a fresh take that you can have with this character over old feuds. This was a great feud back in the early part of 2014 between Daniel Bryan and the Wyatt family. And, this gives it a fresh coat of paint for sure. And, do we see a rematch later on down the line? I wouldn't mind. It'd be a lot of fun. Up next was the 5-on-5 men's elimination match here at the Survivor Series. Team Raw, Seth Rollins, Drew McIntyre, Ricochet, Kevin Owens, and Randy Orton. Of course, Kevin Owens had that storyline of will he jump to NXT, will he not? Team SmackDown was Baron Corbin, Roman Reigns, Shorty G, Chad Gable, and Braun Strowman and Ali. And then Ali, of course, got a huge pop walking out with a Chicago flag. He's in his hometown. Heck, he probably, when he was a police officer, got assigned to patrol different wrestling events at the Rosemont Horizon, at the Allstate Arena, and wherever else throughout the city during the day too. So this had to be real surreal for him. So it was good to see. And Team NXT, which comprised of, and this was, again, another surprise announcement that we found out during the pre-show what their lineup was going to be. The UK champion Walter, Tommaso Ciampa, Damian Priest, Matt Riddle, and Keith Lee. Strowman threw a drop kick within the first minute and a half of this match. Is there anything this dude can't do? He is reaching Vader levels of big man movement at this point. The dude just gets better at every pay-per-view, which is amazing. Just continues to trend upward. What a dude. Walter and McIntyre then squared off. These are two big, strong Haas athletes. I wouldn't mind seeing a UK Championship match between the two of them somewhere in the future. I think that's a program that WWE will probably make happen sometime in 2020. I think they liked the reaction of the crowd from this. But McIntyre eliminated Walter with the Claymore. So there you go. That builds up a great program for them going forward. I refuse to call him Shorty G, so it'll be Chad Gable for the rest of this. But Chad Gable with a Chaos Fury German suplex on Ricochet. That was kind of cringeworthy. It was wow. Kevin Owens with a frog splash on Gable to eliminate him. And then after a stunner to Gable on the outside, Ciampa, well, actually after a stunner not on Chad Gable, my notes are wrong, to King Corbin on the outside, because, Kevin Owens is this working class hero persona again against the establishment and everything. Ciampa eliminated Owens, and, just more and more eliminations. We had Matt Riddle eliminate Randy Orton, which was a huge pop. Orton then comes back in and nails Riddle with an RKO. Corbin comes in and grabs a 1-2-3 on Riddle, so of course that builds up his heel heat. Strowman gets counted out after being derailed by Keith Lee, and a Claymore kick by McIntyre on the outside of the ring. And then Corbin himself gets the end of days on Ricochet to eliminate him. A lot of eliminations going on at this point. Everybody's just wrapping up and going boom, boom, boom. So let's speed to the finish. Seth Rollins got eliminated by Keith Lee, and his jackhammer finisher, one of the finishers that he uses is a jackhammer. And a disputed count after the ref counts free, but Keith Lee kicked out after 2 Superman punches. It was really close, really wild. But the final 2 participants in this was Keith Lee from NXT and Roman Reigns from SmackDown. Again, an incredible closing sequence ends with Reigns hitting the spear on Keith Lee for the 1-2-3, and that gives the final standings 3 wins for NXT, 2 for SmackDown, and 1 for Raw. The WWE Championship is up next. Brock Lesnar takes on Rey Mysterio. I was unsure about Mysterio's clown mask and get up. Was it a Matt Bourne tribute? Was it a Doink tribute? Was it a Joker tribute? You be the judge there. No DQ, so Rey immediately grabs a pipe, but Rey is quickly overpowered. Mysterio lands on a lead pipe off of a German suplex. That was kind of a real cringeworthy moment. Shortly thereafter, Dominic Mysterio runs in and tries to throw in the towel for Rey. It creates a distraction, though, and both Rey and Dominic have the lead pipe, and they just start pounding on Lesnar at this point. Dom hits a frog splash, and then Rey hits a frog splash for a 2 count, but eventually F5, and it's over. This was actually a really entertaining 5 or 6 minutes or so. It showed that Lesnar is vulnerable to gang attacks. Who knew? Lesnar retains the damage. Lesnar retains, I should say, but damage is done. Again, who knew your big juggernaut champion is vulnerable to gang attacks? So maybe that's the way to beat him going forward into 2020. Who knows? Great comment by Paul Heyman at the end of the match, kind of turning to Brock as they were leaving the arena and saying that was too close. That was way too close. Well, yeah, it was. you kind of showed off your weaknesses big time in this match, and again, loved it. It was great. You get an announcement for the next WWE pay-per-view, TLC, on December 15th, and then the main event, the women's title. All 3 women's champions go one-on-one. Becky Lynch from Raw, Shayna Baszler from NXT, and Bayley from SmackDown Live. Will the Queen's Army play a factor here? That's Baszler's faction. Cautious pace to start, but it elevated to a very good TV match towards the middle and the end of it. Becky hits a disarmer attempt on Baszler to no avail, but the finish of the match, Bayley goes for the Hail to the King elbow from the top, and Baszler locks in the Karafuda clutch. Bayley taps out, Baszler wins, and Becky Lynch wasn't involved in the decision at all because she had got tossed over the top of the announce position from Shayna Baszler seconds before, or moments before this sequence went down. The final standings have NXT winning the night with 4 victories, SmackDown with 2, and Raw with just the 1. Post-match, Lynch attacks Baszler, and I popped for this, an Alabama Jam, one of Bobby Eaton's finishers, through the table. I know Becky uses it off the second rope a lot, but like a top rope jumping leg drop through the table onto Baszler. That's as old school as it gets, and the pay-per-view ends with the man holding up the Raw Women's Championship, still standing defiant, as she is the top dog out of all the women. Well, she wasn't last night, but still claims to be. I'll give Survivor Series a solid 8 out of 10. I think that out of the 2 cards this weekend, War Games was definitely the stronger one. I really enjoyed the mid-card champions going one-on-one. I liked the Universal title match, and I really dug the WWE Championship match this time around. I really liked what they did with the Mysterios taking on Lesnar in this one. The 5-on-5-on-5 concepts I wasn't really a fan of, but for once a year it's okay, and if they're done correctly like they were in both the women's and men's matches, they were fine. Just a lot of action to try to condense into 3.5, 4 hours, whatever it was. I think the runtime was like 3:25 or so for this card, but there we go. But anyways, I'm Kellen Nitro, Later Days. Happy wrestling watching. We'll see you next time on Nitro Maniac TV's Wrestling Unlimited. And like, subscribe, share the video around, and comment. What did you think of both shows from this past weekend as WWE rattles off their final major of the year? The Survivor Series is in the books, and NXT War Games as well. So, see you guys.